Hi guys and welcome to the circus. So first of all, I would like to apologize for not uploading recently. I just really needed to catch up on school stuff and some personal stuff as well. We're finally back and I have a lot more content that I want to showcase to you guys. I promise I'll make the time for it. But for now, I'm just gonna showcase you guys the deck list that I used for DF's first ever remote fight tournament a few days back, or at least at the time I'm recording this video. So as the title says, I went with Harri and I unexpectedly got 5th place. I actually have no idea how I got it, but it happened. I know it's not as impressive as top 4, but given the current status of Harri, I'm actually quite impressed that this deck actually showed some amazing results. So without further ado, I think we should get on with the list. For the grade 3s, of course, we are gonna run 4 copies of Harri. 4 copies of him, of course, because you want to ride onto him on your first grade 3 turn. Not getting him is a pain in the ass, to be honest. I had a game where I couldn't find Harri at all throughout the game. I hope you guys won't get that same experience as mine. Also more copies of him because you want to re-ride to produce more axle circles and just up your stage. Along with him is the star of the show, which is Star Pop Dragon himself. You can get away with only running 1, but I like running the second one just in case. If you're really that lucky and not get Star Pop Dragon to the damage zone, you can get away with only 1 copy and just make use of that other slot for another Doll or more Jacquelines or maybe another Dorianne. But there's also another reason why I run 2 copies, which is it's a good excuse to shuffle your deck. This deck actually has no way of shuffling the deck. I know it's like a small thing, but sometimes it can be quite crucial. The cards that can shuffle your deck are your Masquerade Bunnies, your Jacquelines, and your Lore Pigeon Pop, which searches your Star Pop Dragon. There are some situations where you feel like your deck isn't really that well shuffled. If you know that you have another Star Pop Dragon in your deck, that is a great excuse for a shuffle, especially before you attack with your Vanguard, with your drive checks, of course. Maybe for some players, it's just a small thing, but sometimes it can be quite crucial. So I like keeping the 2 copies in my deck for that reason. Rounding off with the grade 3s, the MVP of the deck, which are 3 copies of Dorianne. Man, this girl is just amazing in this deck. As I mentioned before in my older videos where I showcased Harri and Dolls when he was revealed, I mentioned there that if I had the chance to change the grade 3 ratios, I would bump Dorianne to 4. It's like I will run 4 Harri and 4 Dorianne. But at the time, Dorianne is still restricted, so we can't do anything about that. But now, since Dorianne is unrestricted, you're gonna have a good time with her in this deck. I assure you, if you bump up Dorianne more, maybe in this kind of ratio as well as I run 3, she is gonna plus you so hard and lets you survive for that late game when you reach your Star Pop Dragon's threshold. If you see her on your first grade 3 turn, she is gonna plus you so hard. I survived a lot of deadly matchups just because of Dorianne. She just gave me so much more hand advantage, to guard with it. And since everything just went back to soul, all my Dolls are just gonna be reused again next turn. So basically, almost everything in my hand size was just for guarding. I was really tempted to run her at 4, but I found out that I lack the space for it. If you can manage to run her at 4, and if you like that ratio, feel free to use it. It's actually not bad of a choice. But for me, I think 3 is enough. You still want to see her early to mid game, before that 40k threshold for Star Pop Dragon, for you to survive those decks that can really push your hand to the limits. I had a lot of forced matchups in the tournament, like for example Gear Chronicle and Luard, and Dorianne just saved my ass. Also, having more copies of her in hand isn't actually quite bad. You can just return the other copy to your hand to use for next turn. Another reason why I only ran 3 is that I don't like it that much when I need to ride her. I just want to make sure that I always run into Harri, because optimally you want to ride him first. But again, Dorianne isn't that bad of a ride target. If you have a lot of cards that you want in your soul anyway, like for example more Dolls, you can just call them if you have Dorianne as your Vanguard, and then just farm more cards until you get your Harri, which for the record didn't work out in the tournament. I had a game where I was just stuck on Dorianne the whole game. My Harri was just at the bottom of the deck and I just couldn't reach him until it's too late. That was one downside of that, but that was just purely bad luck on my side, so we can't do anything about that. Moving on to the grade 2s, we run 4 copies of Lore Pigeon Pop. Of course, this bird is gonna be your key piece to unlock your Star Pop Dragon every single turn. He also fetches your Magidolls on the drop zone. So if for some reason your Magidolls are in your drop zone, like for example they were healed out of your damage zone or retired from your opponent's card abilities, Lore Pigeon Pop can save that Magidoll and just shove it into soul again. Also, there are situations where you lack one Magidoll in your soul that you want to call using Harri, and you just have it in your hand on your main phase. You can just call that Magidoll onto the stage and then call Lore Pigeon Pop on top of that. And since that Magidoll is now retired, you can fetch that Magidoll from your drop zone to the soul using Lore Pigeon Pop's skill. So that's a cute little trick that you can do. Also, I saw some lists running only 3 of him. Well, technically you only need 1 of him, so it's fine. But I just like maximizing him because you really want to see him and Harri on your first grade 3 turn. It's gonna be really hard if you didn't get at least one of those cards. I mean, you can get away with a few Magidolls missing, but if you just didn't get Lore Pigeon Pop or Harri, you're gonna have a bad time. So it's like if you lack Lore Pigeon Pop in your hand, you're gonna be 1 step behind your opponent, and that 1 step or that 1 turn can actually just cost you the game. Maybe you can get away with maybe you can get away with 3 copies if you want to, just bump up more Jacquelines in order to search him. But I ran 4 because I reduced the copies of Jacqueline. Speaking of her, here she is. So I only ran 2 copies of Jacqueline. So there are a couple of reasons for this. She costs a CB. In the early game, if you have Jacqueline in your hand, it's fine, but it will cost you a CB. You can say that you can just refund it via Darkside Mirror Master, but that would also cost a CB from Harri. Although you only use a little bit of CB, there's still a chance you can be choked. Also, in the late game, Jacqueline is pretty dead. She's just gonna be either discard fodders or just shield values in hand. It's like if I open up with her, it's fine, it adds a little bit more consistency, but aside from my Vanguard and Lore Pigeon Pop, I really don't like using CB on other units, which is why I only ran 2 of her. Moving on to the Magidoll ratios, I ran 3 copies of Piranha and 2 copies of Lunatech Dragon. So this is the ratio that I went with. Piranha is just more valuable than Lunatech Dragon because of the power gain. Lunatech's spot removal skill is actually quite good in some cases, but sometimes it's just a plus to your opponent because it moves to the soul, not retiring. Sometimes there are decks that actually wants more soul, so Lunatech Dragon is just gonna be giving them free advantage. But there are some cases that you actually want to use Lunatech Dragon, and that is when there's a unit on the board that you want to remove before you do something. For example, I had a game against Luard. I believe Luard doesn't use that much soul. Well, they have soul anyway because of all the rewriting they can do. But they have this grade 1 right that gives intercept to the front row grade 1s. Before my grade 3 turn, I just put it in the soul and then he loses 20k shield, which is a lot. So that's one thing you can do. But still, Piranha is still the better grade 2 Magidoll, so you gotta run more of her. She just makes your Vanguard swings more effective in a sense that it has more power, meaning your opponent needs to guard more or maybe force a PG, but they will most likely use their PG anyway because they can't sentinel your Star Pop Dragon. Moving on to the grade 1s, I am running 4 copies of Masquerade Bunny. So obviously we need our Harri ASAP, so Masquerade Bunny is just essential in this deck. Not being able to get Harri is such a huge disadvantage. Also, aside from getting Harri, you can also fetch your Dorianne. I had a game where I needed Dorianne because I know I can't finish off my opponent that turn. At the time, I had Masquerade Bunny in hand, so it's like, I want to try to search for my Dorianne here. So I placed Masquerade Bunny, and then I luckily searched Dorianne, which I then called over her just to place Dorianne on the board and then use her skill at the end phase. That play that I did there actually helped me win the game. Because of it, I actually managed to survive that onslaught and eventually just had my Star Pop Dragon active at 40k or and above, and then just win right there. Next, Magidoll ratios. I decided to run 4 copies of Darkside Mirror Master and 3 copies of Periton. So this is kind of a weird ratio for some, but I really wanted that counter charge early. On your first grade 3 turn, depending on where you're going first or going second, most of the time you can just have at least 2 Magyados in the soul. Because you can't always get all 4. If you did, very awesome. But if not, you can just work with 2. And one of those units that I really wanted to call is Darkside Mirror Master because of the counter charge. That way, I will have less chance of getting choked because I could just use 1 CB for the entire turn and then gain more advantage off it. By the way, the optimal target that I want to call on my first grade 3 turn, if I'm going first, for example, is a copy of Darkside Mirror Master and a Periton. They just give off a lot of advantages from the draw and the counter charge. So if I have these 2 available, I will immediately call those. Maybe put them on the front row because they're all 13k attackers anyway, if I want to get a little bit greedy. Or maybe just call one to the back row of my Vanguard to just make it a 25k attacker and provide a little bit more pressure. You can maybe drop Darkside Mirror Master to 3 and then just have that one slot be maybe another Jacqueline or another Dorianne, or maybe you want to run Golden Beast Tamer. By the way, speaking of Golden Beast Tamer, I have her, but I find her to be unnecessary because out of all the play testing that I've done, I never really used her. First of all, she was so expensive to use because overall you will need to use 3 CBs in order to make her work. And sometimes if I don't need her, she just clogs my deck. That could have been another Magidol that can help me survive, or maybe another Dorianne, or maybe more searchers, which we'll get to later. So this is overall my Magidol ratio. And let's move on to that one card that I find really interesting. To round off the grade 1s, I run 2 copies of Betty. So at first, Betty was kind of a lackluster card. First of all, she isn't a Magidol, so you can't search her. If she was a Magidol, that would have been amazing. But she's not, so we can't do anything about that. The reason why I ran her is because I wanted more searchers. As you remember, I didn't run that much Jacquelines, but I still want to up my search engine. So Betty was the way to go in my part. What I like about her is that she doesn't cost a CB. I was kind of tempted to bump her to 3, but I think that 2 is like the right one for her. It's like you're gonna sacrifice another Magidol just to up your search engine, which is not gonna be a Magidol. If I just happen to open up with her, I just up my chances on getting my Magidols to soul ASAP. Especially when I'm going first, especially if I open up with her on my grade 1 turn. Because then I can just call her, and for 3 turns, I can search my top 3 for a Magidol, which is actually really nice. To be honest, before, I just really didn't like her because she isn't a Magidol, and I was still in a mindset where I would remove Magidols just to fit in more units that searches Magidols. So if I didn't remove that Magidol, it's just gonna be the same. Again, like Jacqueline, she's gonna be dead when you reach your late game. Still, she is a grade 1, so a 10k shield is gonna be really useful. For the triggers, I run 6 draw, 6 crit, and 4 heals, plus the starter. This is by far my favorite trigger lineup for this deck. Before, I used to run 10 crits with 2 sentinel crits, but just adding more draws just ups the consistency more. Also, what I realized here is that you can work with any trigger at all. Your Star Pop Dragon only needs power. Checking a crit would be nice to put in your Star Pop Dragon as well, to threaten more lethal. You don't need to be that aggressive if you're running Dorianne because you want to gain advantage early in order to survive to your late game potential. So having more draws actually helps the consistency. Crits are really good to pressure, so 6 crit is fine. Like I said before, you can work with any trigger because your Star Pop Dragon only needs power. Also, healing is good because sometimes you put your Magidols in a damage zone and then you want to heal it out, fetch it with Lord Pigeon Pop, and shove it in the soul. So yeah, that was my deck profile for Harry. If you have any questions about the list, drop those in the comments and maybe we can start a conversation there. Also about Different Fights Tournament, if you have the chance to join, like for example you were gifted a sub or a current YouTube member of him, I highly suggest that you join the tournament because it's just so much fun. I faced a variety of decks, which is actually really impressive. I only faced a clan twice, which was Gear Chronicle. I won the first Gear Chronicle game and I lost the second due to my opponent just double critting me with a 60k Sentinel restricted Chronojet Dragon. That was a bit unfortunate on my side. It's part of the game. We win and we lose some. Still, the fact that this deck actually brought me to 5th place is just really mind-blowing in my part. And thankfully, it showed some results that I wasn't really expecting. And I hope I got to explain why I ran certain cards in certain ratios effectively. Again, if you have any questions, just drop those in the comments. Or maybe just hit me up on Discord. Our link will always be in the description, so you can hit us up right there. So again, if you have the chance to join DF's tournament next time, I highly suggest that you join because it's just so much fun. Also, do consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you next time.